Okay, everyone. Everybody hear me all right? Good. Okay. Thanks everyone for coming out today for another installment of our second Saturday lecture series. Just a few announcements here before we get started. If anyone hasn't been to the SP post yet, Diane is opening it here for me today. She's in there right now. So when we're done here, if you haven't been in the SP post, you're welcome to stop over. We'll give you a tour. The SP post is open every Saturday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. for tours with our docents. So I'd encourage you to stop by and check that out. Our speaker today was kind enough to draw a few names for our raffle. So the winners for our raffle today was P. Thomas. For D. Thomas. You got two of them, buddy. Ready? DM ready? Got that? And Alex. We got one too. All right. Thank you for supporting our raffle. So today is our last second Saturday lecture before our summer break. We set a new record last year with around 500 attendees of our second Saturday lectures, and right now we are on pace to surpass that in 2024. So thank you for all of your continued support of this series. Working right now on putting together our slate of speakers for 2025. Should be ready to announce all of those in September or October, but I think we have some good historians coming in next year. Like I mentioned last month, I'm also working on plans for our 2025 symposium. I can tell you that the dates of the symposium are Friday, April 11th, and Saturday, April 12th. We are going to include a Friday evening session. We will be moving upstairs to the music hall. We have about 350 seats in there, so we can definitely spread out. They're comfortable seats. That was one of the complaints we had, was the seating downstairs. We'll likely have one speaker on Friday and then another kind of event that we're still working through for Friday evening with some audience interaction and maybe some trivia, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. We'll have a cash bar, we'll have some finger food, and then we'll be back for the full day on Saturday. I already have a theme. I have most of our speakers lined up. We have some really good speakers that we're going to be lucky to have here in Pittsburgh, two keynote caliber speakers. So that should be a really good event, but I'm working to fill out the rest of the lineup, and my plan is to announce the symposium. We're back here in September, and open ticket sales. We'll be back here on September 14th. So that's when we'll open sales. On September 14th, we will have Matt Borders here. Matt is a ranger at Monocacy National Battlefield. He is a licensed guide at Antietam. He will be here to discuss Antietam, but primarily as it relates to Pittsburgh. So he'll talk about some of the Pittsburgh regiments and personalities that were present at the Battle of Antietam. That is the weekend for the anniversary. It's a busy weekend down there at the battlefield, so we're lucky that Matt is coming up here that weekend. He's a great speaker. He's authored several books, so that should be a really good presentation, and I know he'll have his books for sale with him. Looking further down the road, we will be meeting on the third Saturday in October. So I'll remind you several times before then, but rather than the 12th, we will be here on October 19th. I will be speaking down in Harper's Ferry the weekend of the 12th. So our October speaker is going to be Eric Money. He was the former producer at Addressing Gettysburg. He is an accomplished historian in his own right, and he will be here to talk about Pennsylvania reserves in the Civil War. Reserves are his baby. It's what he's really interested in. So that should be a good talk. Back to today. Our speaker today is Michael Kraus. Artist and historian Michael G. Kraus is the Curator of Collections at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall here in Pittsburgh. His impressive list of accomplishments as author, advisor, and collector has culminated in the recognition of Kraus as an accredited authority on the Civil War. Having participated in battle reenactments since 1966, he doesn't really baby. And holding the rank of Captain 116th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Irish Brigade, Kraus's extensive knowledge has routinely been tapped as a military consultant of such feature films and documentaries as Miramax's Cold Mountain, Turner Pictures Gettysburg, and A&E Network's Civil War Journal. The series Civil War Minutes from Inecom Entertainment was co-written by and features Michael Kraus. An award-winning artist, Mr. Kraus earned his Bachelor of Fine Arts from Edinburgh University in Pennsylvania and is the recipient of their Distinguished Alumnus Award. At present, he is one of only a few contemporary sculptors of life-sized historical statuary in both stone and cast bronze. His acclaimed works include museum busts and plaques, and more than 6 large public monuments. Sought out for his skill in restoration, Mike has been called on to create and install the missing swords of 2 monuments on the Antietam National Battlefield. He's also developed and applied the hand-forged patina on the bronze plaque honoring the memory of Flight 93, displayed in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. His latest commissions include a recently dedicated monument to post-9/11 soldiers and 2 portrait busts of commanding generals from the Battle of Franklin, Tennessee. How many of you have seen the movie Gettysburg? How many of you have seen it 25 times? 50 times? Does anyone here not own a copy of the movie Gettysburg? Anybody? You don't have one? Okay, I've got a copy for you. Come see me after. Now, whatever you think of Gettysburg, it's one of the most enduring movies of the Civil War. And in recent years, the movie Gettysburg has been having a moment. From actor interviews over at Addressing Gettysburg to all of the 30th anniversary events in Gettysburg last year at the Adams County Historical Society, to Martin Sheen being in Gettysburg for several days just a few months ago, to the documentary that Jared Frederick produced, which you can see on YouTube featuring Mike Kraus. Fantastic documentary. I highly recommend all of you check that out. But Civil War enthusiasts, we are hard on our Civil War movies. We always want more Civil War movies, and then we try to break them down as soon as they come out. We nitpick over these kind of small details. And problems aside, beards. The movie Gettysburg is aging well, and it's evolving from one of an enduring Civil War movie to an endearing Civil War movie. That's why we put it on every year around the anniversary, why we can quote lines to each other, make each other crack up about that. It's a divine spark, if you will. That's a line of the movie. Our speaker today played a big part in the filming of Gettysburg. Maybe he'll tell us where we can find him on camera at the movie when we all break out our DVDs later this month and watch it for the anniversary, or our VHS. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Kraus.
Thanks, John Eric. It's always funny listening to your own introduction. Oh, that guy, you did that though. I had the privilege. Well, let me back up a little bit. Like all, how many of you guys got interested in the Civil War when you were kids? I mean, kids. I was 10 years old, and it just flipped the switch, and it was magic. And I couldn't stop looking for things from the Civil War. I was just fascinated by it. Luckily, I had a good teacher in junior high school who nurtured that. He was a collector. He used to bring in objects from his collection and let us look at them and learn about them. And that kind of fostered a sense of material culture. And hence, I was always interested in art. My art interest comes in portraying, these people and events in bronze or stone, and also the interest. It just grew. It just became the cornerstone of why I'm a curator of soldiers and sailors. But I want to go back in time a little bit. In 1980, 81, I was just moved back to Pittsburgh, and I got a call from a friend of mine who said he had somebody that wanted to sell a sword. Would I be interested in it? So I went and met the guy, and when I bought the sword, he said, if you like Civil War stuff, you should go up to the library. There's a room full of it up there. And I found a board member, was able to get into the room, and it was King Tut's tomb. I mean, it was piled with spare furniture. It was dirty. The window shades were torn and broken. But that led to the beginning of saving this place. And I just was a beginning part. A lot of people have done a lot of work. Work that has made this a cultural landmark, a unique cultural landmark. It's so pleasing to be here and to see what you guys have all done with it. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So saying that, I'm going to jump into the movie. By 1992, when this was filmed, I had already been reenacting for a number of years. And I had been in the 125th anniversary series. I had been chosen to be the federal commander of the Union Army. I have a lot of connections in the reenacting world, and it was growing by leaps and bounds at that time. So I was, 33 years old, and I was in charge of 7,000 men on the battlefield, and that was really amazing. It was an amazing experience to have. And what's key in that is there were people there scouting for the movie Gettysburg, and they were taking notes on what the scenes were going to look like and kind of what land they were going to use. And a few years later, it came out that there would be this film filmed based on Michael Shara's book Killer Angels. Before that time, just a little bit of background. If you look at Civil War films in our film culture, the first one is Uncle Tom's Cabin, produced in 1903. Civil War films are a real part of our filmography, American filmography. And you have to remember that at this time in history, there are a lot of Civil War veterans living. So they're watching these scenes played out on the big screen, something they couldn't have imagined during the time of the war. 13 films produced in 1908. You're going to see how many more films are going to appear. 23 in 1909, 34 in 1910, and almost 100 Civil War films produced per year through 1916. That's a lot of films. Now, they're not all documentaries. They're stories, they're shorts, they're long. Many of them have been lost to time, but we just know film historians have recorded that amount of film and interest in the Civil War. It was even in our modern times. Glory is one of the films that is an Academy Award winner. It's a great film. I don't believe there's anybody here that hasn't seen it, but it's a film I often recommend to people to see. Of course, there's Gettysburg, Gods and Generals, which did not do near what was expected, Cold Mountain, The Beguiled, Free State of Jones, Little Women. These are just examples of more modern films with the Civil War as a topic. And a lot of the sweep towards modern films, they want to make films that are, first of all, good stories and historically accurate. It was a big thing when we talked about Gettysburg, that the producers wanted to make sure that it was accurate. And that's why they hired myself and a number of other people to be on-set historical advisors, meaning we would watch for things that wouldn't be used, eyeglasses, watches. Those are the things that really stand out. But variants of uniforms that weren't correct. We would try to find correct uniform, correct gear for people that were going to be close to camera, and we just want to make sure everything was accurate, not like this. I love this picture because that officer is dressed in really good Civil War equipment, and two of the brothers here are holding Civil War rifles with bayonets. So it's really pretty interesting. It must have just been leftover stock that came from the costume department. But speaking of accuracy, this is of course it wasn't meant to be so accurate in this film, but it's called Civil Warriors. If you ever get a chance to see it, it's a really good Three Stooges short. So the book comes out 1974. This is the first edition. I have it back there. It won a Pulitzer Prize. This is before it had won the prize. I mean, this picture is before it won the prize. And Michael Shara sold the film rights, and he collaborated with Ron Maxwell, the person who was the director of the film, and they wrote the script for it. And Shara, unfortunately, was in a motorcycle accident. He passed away, so he didn't live to work on the film, and Ron Maxwell picked up the ball and ran with it. It was produced by Ted Turner of Turner Pictures. There's Ted dressed in a Confederate uniform. I'm going to have some other remarks about him a little bit later. He espouses himself as a Civil War expert. He reads a lot about the Civil War. He lives in Georgia, born in Ohio, but lives in Georgia, and without him, the film wouldn't have been made. Now, the film started out to be a 10-part television series. It was going to be installed on TV. in parts. Luckily, they decided to shoot it on film instead of video. And as they started shooting, they saw the richness in it as a film, and then set about to make it a film rather than a series. If at the time you were interested in being in the film, there was some periodicals at the time. There was no internet, remember the days before the internet? There was no internet, so there were Civil War periodicals that came out that advertised opportunity to become part of the film. The film was called The Killer Angels. It was called that even up to the time it was being filmed. It was just being called The Killer Angels. And this is one of the fact sheets that talks about what the book was, what the scenes are going to be, that the script is faithful to the book. It's very interesting. It kind of lays out if you were interested in becoming a participant in what the film was going to be about. This is one of the sign-up sheets that you would have filled out. They were looking for people who could make a commitment to time. Not everybody could break away from your job and do a 10-week movie shoot. So we're looking for people who could do bulk parts, 1 week, 2 weeks, or perhaps the whole thing. And those people they would pay them $50 a day. They wanted younger looking, authentic looking facial hair perhaps. And they also were interested if you had several sets of uniforms because they could plug you into different places. Now keep in mind, most movies have a costume department and they hire extras, they put them in costumes, and then they film their scenes. This film was going to use reenactors who, every one of us is a historian, or we think we are, and we think we know how to wear our gear, and we think we can portray that. So they were getting all this gear and all the knowledge that we had for free. It was really coming to them because we wanted to do it. We were interested in doing it. There was a lot of talk beforehand. A few years earlier, the film North and South had come out. That was a mini series on television. A lot of reenactors participated in that, and they were very excited because the scenes they did they thought were really good. And when the series came out, there was very little footage of the battles and the marching that they filmed, and much more romance and open-shirted, officers and big hats, and they were disappointed. So a lot of reenactors were not really 100% on deck with coming unless we could prove that the film would be authentic. That was a hard thing to prove. I'll talk a little bit about it, or to say what would happen. I'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. But keeping on with the theme of being on the set and being there, most of the film was shot off of Pumping Station Road and Bullfrog Road. If you're going down towards Thurmont, Maryland, it's back in the back roads there. They had several farm locations that were rented. They were beautiful. They were Civil War. It was a big Civil War, a barn. There was a road that crossed across the property. The farm on the other side had a really nice slope, just like Pickett's Charge, approaching from the Confederate side to the northern side. They erected stone fences. They built the fences, the walls, and the angle. It was pretty spectacular to kind of see what was going on. And this just shows you the logistics of everything. There's parking areas. There's places for different brigades to camp. This one has on the right you see it says entertainment tent. Those are the toilets. They call it an entertainment tent. And then again, you see where stuff was dropped off. There was a catering. We would come every morning at dawn, and we would receive our food and then move on to the locations that were being filmed that day. It wasn't a very authentic camp. I mean, you would expect that, like in a reenactment, you just see a sea of white tents and no anachronisms, but this was a job, and there were parts of the camp that were some units that kind of commandeered and kept their company streets and made it more authentic. But this was a parking haven. A lot of people had campers. Their cars were close by, you know, it was different than a reenactment, just very, very different than a reenactment. This is, talking about our pay. You would get, you know, $50 cash per day if you were chosen to stay in the long run times. In fact, we took those people, we called it the core group, because we picked like 30 guys in that group who could be there for 6 to 10 weeks and had, you know, good facial hair, good uniforms, and they were almost in every scene. I mean, they would switch uniforms sometimes. If they had a close-up shot, were bearded, and the next shots they would have shaved their beard, and you wouldn't recognize them. And if you, you know, when I look at it, I can see the same guy in the Union uniform, and it'll appear in a Confederate uniform later. But those are just the little kind of hidden things that happen for manpower. This is a shooting schedule, so it goes by the week, and it tells us where we're going to shoot and what's going to happen. It tells you the day, the scenes that are in the script, who is needed for that, and then in our part, the consultant part, there'd be instructions for how many men they needed dressed out that day. So in this one, I can't really see it, but it would often say like 100 Confederate infantry, 10 officers, 3 mounted officers, a cannon, and all that stuff had to be on standby and ready for the director and the crew to put them in place, get them through makeup, and then get the cameras all set, and then get these men in position. This is the call sheet. This was every day you picked up a call sheet, and that again told you what scenes were being filmed, what actors were on set, and what actors were in holding. So in this one, I mean, you can't see it, but it says Martin Sheen here with an H, Tom Berenger here, Richard Jordan, he's not here, James Lancaster. This is the whole roster of Confederate officers. And then here is the atmosphere and standings. Again, those are the, 100 Confederate infantry soldiers, 10 Union infantry soldiers, 4 horses. That would all be listed in the call sheet for the day. The call sheet was different for every day, and there would be, these were all exterior shots. So if the weather was bad, they would have an interior shot call sheet, and they had locations around town that they could set up, like the interior of Lee's headquarters, or the interior of Meade's headquarters. Those were sound stages that they had where they could retreat to if the weather became bad. So the script was held in pretty much secret because of course, they don't want it getting out before the film. This is my copy of the script. It's back there. If you want to look up your favorite lines, they're in there. But again, looking at reenactors and what we would commit to and whether we were making a project that was authentic or not, we asked that we would be able to review the script. And they weren't really 100% on with that, but eventually, we said we can, if we're confident that the script is accurate, we'll be able to recommend it and we'll get you the people you need. So they allowed us to send a script to Brian Pohanka. People know who Brian is. Brian was, he's since passed away, but he was a leading historian. He started Civil War Battlefield Trust. He's an author. He was in Civil War Journal repeatedly. He's in the Ken Burns series several times. He's just a brilliant historian. They overnighted it to him. He read it and sent it back the next day with 80 pages of changes. And the director said, like, who is this guy? And they started looking at the changes and they're going, well, this is good. This is good. All right, we can do this and we can do that. And Brian was allowed to, he was allowed to have his input. And we all trusted Brian, so we could recommend to our friends that the screenplay had been reviewed by Brian Pohanka, and some changes were made, but we think it's fine. This is a page in the script. I chose this because this is Chamberlain's talk to his men when he's got the rebellious guys from the 3rd Maine, and he's trying to convince them that they're going to fight with him. And he's telling those guys about the 20th Maine and who they are. And it's just wonderful to kind of read because you've seen it. And if you read it and think that Jeff Daniels or any of these actors had to memorize this and pull it off, it's quite a feat. I mean, they're professional actors, and we don't think that's hard, but it's really hard when there's cameras all around you and there's people pumping smoke at you and you're sweating, and it's very difficult. And some actors didn't want to talk to people on the set because they're at work. You know, they're trying to learn their lines, trying to get in the right mood. Chamberlain was kind of like that. Berenger was like that. Martin Sheen, you could walk up and talk to him all day. But he was like an everyman's man. He liked talking to people. They often had to find him when his scenes were coming up because he was often talking to 3 or 4 guys. It just shows kind of the difference in the different actors. This is Brian Bohanka. As a reenactor, he portrayed a captain in the 5th New York Duryea Zouaves. His impression, we call our look and impression, was flawless. I mean, Brian was an officer in the 5th New York. On his tombstone, it says Captain Brian Bohanka, 5th New York Duryea Zouaves. He died of he had a brain tumor, and it was discovered not long after the film. A few years, he lost an eye and was getting better, and then the cancer returned and he passed away. It's been about 20 years now, if I'm correct. Brian can be seen in the film in a couple places. This is in Pickett's Charge, the man in the front with the white gauntlets, playing Alexander Webb, as Webb is rallying his men to fill the gap at the angle. That was Brian. He was given kind of that role, and he was very animated doing it. It was kind of fun to watch him because he didn't have to be told what to do. He knew exactly what to do, and was very inspiring in that role. This is another picture of Brian. That's a corps flag, corps marker flag for a commander. Brian's head is right under the little tip of it, and that's the angle, waiting for things to get cooking. When they shoot a picture, it's all out of sequence. You know, you think you'd be doing something today that ties in tomorrow, that ties into the next day. But it's very much out of sequence. For instance, it took us like 2.5 weeks to film the pre-staging of Pickett's Charge, with all the guys. They go from the wood to falling out on the wood line, to giving the command to march, and they march through the guns. And then when they'll cross the field, we'll show you more of that later. But it takes a good 2 or 3 weeks to get enough footage to make up that 10 or 20 minutes of film. Brian not only reviewed the script, but he said, hey, there's a couple of things you could insert that are just kind of historic, and they're so accurate that the people who know Gettysburg will know what you're looking at. And this is one of the scenes. It's very brief. It happens kind of quickly. Hancock is on his horse and he's watching. And if you're familiar, this would be Father Corby blessing the Irish Brigade before the second day's fight in the wheat field. Corby has a monument on the battlefield of him standing on a rock. This was a reenactor named Ben Mariniak. He was very interested in the chaplains of the Civil War. And again, he knew exactly what to do. Didn't have to be told, but it was a pretty awe-inspiring scene, much as it would have looked like on July 2nd of Corby giving absolution to the men of the Irish Brigade who were about to plunge into the wheat field. Another scene that Ryan thought to add was, I don't know if you'll recognize this, but it's at the top of the triangular field around Devil's Den at the very top. And that stone wall, if you look down, the stone wall is where the Orange Blossoms, the 124th New York position they held and Hood's Texans were advancing from the bottom there. This was filmed on the actual spot. There are very, very few scenes in the film that were filmed on the battlefield of Gettysburg, because that was a huge political undertaking to use the battlefield. Couldn't be damaged, had to be controlled. Visitors couldn't visit that part of the field that day. So anything that was filmed there was filmed because it looked, there was no other place that could be substituted for it. And you know, these were encapsulated little bits and pieces. So in that scene, Van Horn Ellis, commander of the 124th, is mounted and he's riding, encouraging his men. And he was advised not to be on his horse because he made a target. And he said something to the effect of, "The men must see me." And this is on the actual spot that this happened. Keep an eye on this white horse too. He's going to show up a couple times. So Van Horn Ellis gets shot off his horse. This was the scene, but what happened that nobody really knew about and why the horse is so agitated, the horse stepped in a beehive and he got like, he was getting stung all over and he was going crazy, but it made good film footage. I mean, it was really an opportune moment to see this horse just shocked by what was going on. Another scene that Brian wrote in was Gouverneur Warren standing on Little Round Top. This was filmed on the actual spot. They put a big camouflage net over Warren's statue, and they tried to keep the statue out of the camera angle. And the man playing Gouverneur Warren, some of you may know who are reenactors, is a character known as Dirty Billy. He's a hat maker. He has a store in Gettysburg. He makes really good Civil War hats. And Billy has been a longtime reenactor and bears a striking resemblance to Warren. And again, it's a very brief scene, but if you know your Gettysburg, you know, you have friends that are uninitiated, you can say, "Oh, that's Gouverneur Warren, a Little Round Top." Then you get extra credit points. So I ended up, I was hired to be part of the federal filming when they were going to do the Pickett's Chart and the Little Round Top scenes. And I was going to be in charge of a federal brigade. That would have been my job. About 3 or 4 days into the filming, the company that was providing the reenactors for the film was a company called Napoleonic Tactics. And they had put on most of the 125th anniversary events. So they had a good background. They had lots of people's names and ways to connect them. But their image was soured through kind of a rumor mill. And a lot of people, a lot of reenactors did not want to come to anything that was associated with Napoleonic Tactics. So in the first week or two, on the call sheets, when it said, you know, 200 Confederate infantry, 12 were there, or 6, or 5. And the producers were really upset. They were losing money. They didn't know how to turn everything around. Everything was there. All Hollywood was there, no extras. So they contacted me and asked me if I would help bring some legitimacy to it. That's when I asked if the script could be read. That's when we introduced Brian. And so they had me and Brian come down and we got on the phone and we called everybody we knew and said, "Look, they're gonna let us have a big part in it. We're gonna have say, we're gonna be able to keep things correct to the best of our ability. And, you know, won't you come and support us? This could be a great opportunity." And people just started coming. It's like you know, the waters parted and people came. So my first night, I really rushed down to the set, kind of dropped everything. I had 2 small children. One was a baby, my daughter was a baby. And when they called me and asked if I would come, I said, my wife works and I'm watching the kids and I work from home. And they said, "Well, what's it going to take to get me here?" I said, "Well, you know, my wife works, I have 2 small kids. What's it going to take to get you here?" Started thinking, well, okay, now we're talking about a deal. So I got babysitting. I got my family to visit occasionally, and I got paid a pretty good amount for at the time to come, and that made. They also paid for my sister-in-law to come from California to my house, to my home in Ohio with her kids. She was going to be my babysitter. They paid for it. So that worked. So when I first got to the set, and being a lack of extras there, they decided to shoot these night scenes. They advanced the shooting schedule. If you remember, these are the scenes around the campfire with Kemper and Pickett and Garnett, and they're talking to I forget his name, James Lancaster, who's the actor. Fremantle. We're talking to Fremantle. And we shot these over and over and over again. I think I was standing in one of those white tents back there with a Confederate uniform on. All night, over and over and over again, different angles, people talking. The whole week was shot at night. It was all a night shoot. And Brian and I would go back to the offices and resume our duties of calling people. But it was enough to start the flow of reenactors coming in, and things started to really take shape. So most of the film that I was there for was the Confederate scenes. They were all shot in the first 6 weeks of the film. I don't portray a Confederate when I be reenacting. I'm a Union officer. I feel strongly about that. But I was able to patch together a pretty good kit for being a Confederate officer. The picture on the left is a tintype. They had a tintype artist there taking pictures of the staff and crew. Some of those pictures are shown in the very beginning of the film when they're showing the federal staff and the Confederate staff. So some of us were able to get our likeness struck, and I prize that as a souvenir from the film. I also was able to do some of the federal scenes. This was at the angle. They would be filmed after the Confederate scenes. The uniform I'm wearing there is back on that mannequin with a 30 years more wear on it than it had at this point in time. But needless to say, that's the uniform I was wearing at the time. It's fun when you're on set because you can kind of, I had a special pass and a crew pass, so I could get places where like reenactors really couldn't get. I could get crew food, which is amazing. And I could get access to the actors. My job was kind of to be near the camera to watch, again, for anachronisms, watches, hats with giant feathers in them, try to talk the big fat guys into being in the background. It didn't always work because they knew where the camera was and they would come up and be in a scene, and being sensitive because some of them were my friends, but they just were too big to be, your typical Confederate on a campaign in the campaign into Pennsylvania. So a lot of tact was needed to do that, but we were able to meet a lot of the actors. This is Royce Applegate. He played Kemper. This was a stand down day. There was a press day that in the middle of filming they had a lot of press come and they were kind of talking about the film and getting a buzz going. So, I've been working with these guys, but it was kind of a day off. You could get your photograph taken with many of them. Some of the biggest stars on the movie set were these guys. The horses, I was told, had been in like 50 or 60 movies. They were just big stuffed horses, but they were dead. And they rent them from a Hollywood costume company. And their legs are broken and they're hanging off and their skin is peeling back. But you throw them out in the field and you throw a couple of dummies, bodies around them, you don't have to pay them and they don't move. And they can stay in the hot sun. It makes really good background. And every day they come out with these trailers full of dead guys and dead horses and they walk them out. The horses were filled with like a styrofoam spray, like an insulation spray. So they weighed like 30 pounds. Two guys could pick up a horse and walk around with it. There's some really comical pictures I've seen from people with these props. But again, you don't think of these things when you're watching a movie in the background and you see a lot of dead people or dead horses. And this is kind of how they get there in the morning when their curtain call comes. Meeting different people. This is Billy Campbell. He was in The Rocketeer. He was in a number of TV series. He showed up one day and was introduced to me, and he wanted to make sure that his union uniform looked really good. And we started talking, and turns out he's the descendant of a soldier from Western Pennsylvania. His great grandmother was in the 134th Pennsylvania from Lawrence County, which is where I'm from. So we had a lot to talk about. I knew a lot about the regiment. We stayed in touch for a little while. He showed up again at Gods and Generals. I did a couple days consulting there, and we did a little catch up. But once you lose these guys, like you lose their current email, they're gone because they keep changing it so people don't know where they are. Don't bother. But a really good guy, really interested in history. Wanted to make sure his Corps badge was right. He's wearing it in the right place, and he only appears very briefly in some of the scenes with Strong Vincent when Vincent is talking to Chamberlain. Probably the person I spent the most time with and consulting was Martin Sheen. When we started filming, he hadn't even been hired yet. They actually didn't know who was going to play a lead. They didn't have the actor contract yet. So I was at the film office one morning, and there's Martin Sheen. He was just there. I didn't know he was going to be lead, and I was introduced, and a lot of us were introduced to him. And later in the afternoon, he came out to the set. He got his costume on, and he came out to the set, and guys went wild. I mean, he was riding. Remember that white horse I was talking about? You'll see him here in a second. But when Martin Sheen came onto the set, it was an unscripted moment. And if you are thinking he's acting fear there, he's not. He's terrified. He was terrified. He didn't know what this reaction was. He had no idea what this was about. In fact, just look at the credit. Hey, by the way, if you have a patch on, you're going to get in the film. It's a good way to find yourself. I'm the guy with the patch. The lead, let me look at the face. He was terrified. But again, this wasn't supposed to be a film. And the director said, "Get some cameras out there." So like all these cameras run out, and they're catching this moment, and you see it in the film. It's kind of like the Lee, which wouldn't have been done. These guys were familiar with Lee; they'd seen him many times. But it's kind of a moment, and it works in the film. It works in the Hollywood film. We spent a lot of time, like I said, forming up and practicing and getting shots of the Confederate assault, stepping out of the woods. It was arranged in the way that it actually happened in different battle lines behind, one behind another, different brigades behind each other. There were a lot of scenes shot in those woods there, scenes of explosions blowing up. I remember one day the guy on the horse out there, the first guy, in one of those scenes, his horse went over and fell on him and broke the rider's leg. He was out of the film from that on. And if you're watching too, there's one scene filmed in those woods. I think when they just step out, the wind is blowing the leaves like crazy. They're flipping over, and you can tell it's really windy. There was a tornado on its way, and they were trying to capture, as much as they could because they had everybody there before the weather turned bad. So it's kind of neat to see all that action in the foliage happening. And it's not matched up to anything else. Nothing else. No other tree shots like that are moving around quite as much. So this is filmed on the Lady Farm, the Daniel Lady Farm, not on the battlefield. And again, it took us a long time. There was a row of cannons, maybe 30 yards in front of the line, and they opened the cannonade with those cannons. They fired not in a battery fire, but they fired by the gun. Boom, 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 boom. And to capture that, the film company had never seen one before. I mean, now they're pretty common. They had a drone. They call it a helicopter. I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. in a minute, but they flew that helicopter right over each gun as it went off. That's in the film. Boom, 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 as the helicopter goes by. This is the assault coming, supposedly, coming through the guns and out, but this scene was actually filmed on the battlefield on the Pickett's Charge field. That was a one-day permission that we had. I know that they were trying to get that permission for weeks. And rumor has it that Ted talked to George. And what does that mean? Ted Turner talked to George Bush, the president, who overrode the Park Service and let us use the field for one day. Now we had to be very protective, like all the inway. If you picture where the Virginia Monument was, that's where the staging was. And they laid down 3/4-inch plywood sheets as a road, so they could get all the tractors in that had the gear, the equipment, the cameras, and that was all set up behind. And then they had cameramen dressed in uniforms, in Confederate uniforms, who were in the ranks and walking with them. And the field had been staged with explosions all over the field. There were explosions, and we were told, if you see a little marker flag, don't step on that. There's an explosion. That's an explosive charge. If you happen to be near an explosion when it goes off, react as you would. Like if it's close, you're gone, fall down. If it's, if you can move forward. But the idea was once there was a big hole in the line, just like on the assault, we were to dress to the center, more to the center. So our lines kept having these holes blown in them, and we dressed and we kept moving forward. So it was a pretty unbelievable scene to be in. We were only allowed to do it once. The Park Service only allowed us to do it once. So it had to be captured in its entirety in that one take. Here's another view of it coming through the field. It was pretty remarkable. This is the drone, the helicopter. This thing was like this big, it was giant. And they said to it, it was radio controlled. So they had a guy, a team in a convertible car, and the guy had a little, joystick thing, and they were driving the car along out of camera range, and the guy's flying the helicopter in front of you. And the only thing they instructed us was don't look at the helicopter. Because you can imagine if it's flying over and everybody's like this, that scene is not going to be used. You're not going to get in the film. This was the biggest shooting day we had. One of the things I was responsible for was keeping track of the numbers of people because food had to be ordered, catering had to be ordered for everybody. And then we could break up our numbers as needed. So we did it in a military fashion because we were all reenactors and everybody had a unit. So we asked all the commanders, we passed out morning reports. And we had all the commanders in the morning have their men fall out. They took roll, they counted, and they gave us a morning report. They told us how many men we had. So in the morning we did this before dawn. Several of us stood and we calculated the number of participants we would have for this charge. And the number was 1,862, 1862. So I put myself on the list that made 1863. So we had 1,863 people on this charge, one-time charge. The other thing they told us, we weren't allowed to cross the road, the Emmitsburg Road. The charge had to stop at the fence at the Emmitsburg Road. If you can imagine the momentum of 1,800 people moving with the hair standing up on the back of your neck, just passing through explosions and anything you can imagine, it was really hard to stop. I mean, it was really, they had Park Service Rangers all around the front, just like halting everybody to stop. This is during the charge. Explosions going off. I had the opportunity to be a mounted rider in this. I mean, there were only a handful of Confederate officers that were mounted. in the charge, so you're not going to see a lot of horses. And they let me ride the white horse. Remember Lee had the white horse? Everybody had the white horse. The white horse is in so many scenes, it's hard to imagine, but I was able to ride the white horse, and the horse was like so tired. He had been through explosions, he'd been out every day, like nothing bothered him. So it was really hard to keep him moving. You know, I couldn't keep him moving. I had to kick his belly, turn him around in circles, and make all kinds of moves to get him going, but he was a good boy, and we made it through the charge. This is another shot of coming across the original field. This is looking, I think, from the Emmitsburg Road, across the Emmitsburg Road. From the federal side, this is not the battlefield. This is the Nancy farm. That's the fence at the angle that they built with rocks. To the exact scale of the fence that's there today. We were watching, they were filming some of the Confederate action scenes, explosions, close-ups, across the street in a big field, so they could be blended in with the original battlefield shots, more close-ups. I mean, we're gonna try to want to get to this point. This is a Mort Kunstler painting that was done using still photographs from the production. This is a production photograph of the apex of the charge hitting the wall. And you can see the cluster of men trying to break through. Armistead is there on top of the wall with his arm raised, and it was pretty hot in there. It was just really pretty hot. And what my job was, that's me standing on the right, I had to watch that nobody got hurt. I couldn't prevent them from getting hurt. I mean, remember, they're running with bayonets and they're excited, and there's smoke and there's explosions, and there's the Yankees are right there, you know, they can change history and break through. So my job was to watch, and I was dressed in my Confederate uniform in case there was an injury. I could run in and kind of you know, triage what was happening and without damaging the shot. On the right hand side, you can see the camera. They built like a trolley track, and the camera was tracking up right alongside that whole charge. One of the interesting things to work with was the stuntmen. Stuntmen are a breed among themselves. These guys go from film to film. They get hurt, they get broken, and they love it. They have a fraternity, and they just keep doing it over and over again. And I was with the director and the stunt director. We were talking about, the question arose, how close can you get to a cannon when it goes off? And, you know, the chief of artillery, who owned the guns, I can't remember, Charlie Smith. He said, well, you know, you don't have to put a full charge in. You can put a very light charge in, and you'll get all the smoke, but you just won't get the noise, and it won't be dangerous. And the director and the film director said, that's great, we can add that in later. We can add the noise or the smoke or the fire, we can add that all in. So they were satisfied with that. And these stuntmen, they were like a little cluster of guys. They did a practice, and then they literally were right up to the cannon. You can see it when it goes off. And they would fly back. They had things like, in this shot, they were walking, this was in the field of the attack. When they walk and hit a certain spot, they're stepping onto an air ramp that has a jacket. When they step on it, and somebody has a trigger button, it took the ramp and blew them up in the air. So that's how they all end up in the air and flying around in circles. Those guys had rubber guns with rubber bayonets because they could hurt someone. I mean, their weapons are all over the place. They're flying. So I had the opportunity to, like, when you're in a consulting or a role that like even in armorers or anything, a lot of times they'll give you a little sweetheart role, you know, just for a few seconds. So I was supposed to accompany at the Emmitsburg Road, we're running towards the fence and we're gonna cross over the fence. And you know, it's 5 rails high with a split rail fence. And I was running with a stuntman. We're together, we're supposed to be together, as it was explained to me. We would both cross over the fence, jump over, and then we were to run to the left. I think it was, yeah, to the left. And he was gonna run in front of me, and there was a charge in the ground that he was gonna step on and get blown up. And that was gonna be the shot. So here we are, jumping over the fence. Now, I remember looking at the fence thinking, it's 5 rails, like hit rail 2, 4, and then jump over. So when they said action, that's what I did, and he did, but this guy had never worn a sword on his belt before. And that sword tripped him, like he's about to go head over heels here. And when he goes head over heels, I look back and think, uh-oh, there's this man. Like, where is he? And I just kept running, and I got blown up there. And honest to God, I thought I really got blown up because all I remember, I didn't know exactly where the charge was. And all I remember is this explosion, stuff in my face. I got splinters in my neck, and I just went down. And I was laying there, and the scene was over, they called cut, and they were like, that was great, that was great. Nobody said, how's Mike? You know, like, is he alive over there? But it's a moment that was captured. It's actually cut into the film twice. The explosion is in there twice if you look carefully. And it was captured by Mort Kensler, who did a book of drawings based on the film. Another scene, this is another one that Brian had something to do with. This is Garnett. You know, he had been kicked by his horse a week or so earlier, and his leg was tender, and he had been given permission not to make the charge, but he insisted on doing it and being mounted, which was really a death sentence. And this scene, when we ride up, he rides up close to a break in the fence in the Emmitsburg Road, and he's encouraging his men, you know, let's give them a cold steel. And he's coming through, and he rode up towards the guns, and the guns fired canister, and Garnett disappeared. There was never anything found of him. Not his body disappeared. And it's recorded, like somebody remembered seeing his horse charge out from the smoke. So that's a scene that's actually in the film. That's, you know that's for real. Then that makes it kind of good. There's a couple scenes. Remember this one where Chamberlain's brother Tom is talking to a couple prisoners, asking them, you know, just finding out a little bit about them and what they're fighting for. And the one soldier says, "We're fighting for our rats." And Tom shakes his head, "Your rats? What do you mean?" And they were fighting for their rights. And it was just his accent there. But the scene looks like this in full. Anybody recognize this? Is there a hint of recognition? Let me show you. A couple people saying they recognize it. It's taken from this Winslow Homer painting of on the front. That's Francis Barlow questioning some Confederate soldiers. There's another scene where Reynolds is killed and he's laying on the ground, and it's kind of like a twilight morning scene with real soft lighting, and that's also based on a painting of the death of that Wilderness. Who's the general? Sedgwick, yeah, death of Sedgwick. He's laying there and men are gathered around. It's a very similar photograph. Another for real thing that happened, Pickett and his men ride up to the supposed Cadore barn where he watched the charge. And he was excited. He was a great horseman. He got a real spirited horse. And when he landed there, the horse decided to jump up and throw him off. And this was real, it wasn't scripted. He got thrown off his horse. Not missing a beat. He gets up and starts saying his lines. It was pretty amazing. I was standing right behind the camera and saw it. So it was really pretty amazing to see. Ted Turner, talked about him a little bit, being producer of the film, Turner Films. He actually played a little minor part. He has a credit line in the film. And that is, he played Willard Tazewell Patton, General Patton's great uncle, who was in the 7th Virginia, that was killed at Pickett's Charge. This is who Turner's supposed to be playing. But Patton actually had a shell hit his jaw and died a few days later. But this was Ted Turner's claim to fame. I guess he didn't want to get his jaw shot off. He was shooting off his mouth, but he got shot in there. And they, of course, had cameras all around him. And because he's the money man, you want to make sure he makes an appearance in production. A couple of kind of interesting things, interesting little scenes that I could swear to you that are not really common knowledge. This is, the death of Armistead. Armistead's wounded, and he's bleeding, and he's surrounded. There's Tom Chamberlain and a couple officers. The man on the right, the red-haired officer, is a reenactor. His name was Dave Centorelli. He was a friend of mine. He'd been there for the whole filming. He was able to get into the scene. He's holding Armistead's hand. It was a very emotional scene. I remember when it was over. The whole crew and everybody was very moved by the acting in the scene. And I remember Dave was crying. He was kind of emotionally taken in by it. But what happened, this is post-movie. Dave, in 1999, was a little bit emotionally unstable, unknown to me, but he ended up killing his girlfriend. He stabbed her, cut her throat, and stabbed her several times, and went to prison for 25 years. Since 25 years is up, he's now a free man, but that was where he went after the Gettysburg film. This scene was at Lee's headquarters on the shooting on the 2nd. The man on the right with the long beard is a reenactor. His name was Don Patterson. He was the overall head of most of the Confederate reenacting. The Confederate reenacting world was a cohesive unit. They had a whole structure, and he was at the apex of it. He had a staff. People called him general. I mean, even in civilian life, he was convinced he was a reincarnated Confederate soldier. He felt, a lot of connection to the Confederate soldiers. A few years after the movie, he was a builder. He built homes on the eastern shore of Maryland. A few years after the filming, he had built a house for some people that was relatively close to him, and he fell in love with a woman who was married, and he was also married. Fell in love with a woman, and he wanted her to leave her husband, and he was going to leave his wife, and they would, have a relationship. She refused, so he killed her, and then he killed himself. Like ghosts of Gettysburg. Some other interesting things. This is in the scene in the woods when Major Freemantle was walking, talking to Armistead, and they're talking about sons of Virginia, and this is so-and-so, and this family, and so-and-so. One of those actors is this young man. I don't know if you recognize him, but it's Rob Hodge from Confederates in the Attic. He's become one of the best known kind of a battlefield preservationist, best known historians. He had his own film company for a number of years. Good friend of mine, but this was in his kind of early career with film, and then he goes on to be one of the big characters in Confederates in the battle. This is the invitation for the world premiere of the filming of Gettysburg. I was invited. A lot of people were invited. It was held in Washington, D.C. They closed down Pennsylvania Avenue and had these giant entertainment tents, venue tents. They had great meals. The movie was shown at one of the theaters right there in Washington. I took my wife, who was not impressed by Hollywood people and My husband does that reenacting stuff, and we were in one of the food tents walking around, and I noticed behind her, I noticed somebody behind her was Jacques Cousteau, and she's a big fan of Jacques Cousteau. I said, Cheryl, that's Jacques Cousteau. Then she was enamored with the whole thing. She thought it was very cool to be there. This is some of the periphery from the film, world premiere ticket invitation. On the bottom is my crew pass. Like I said, the crew pass was a pass that you could really get the best food and the best place near the camera and anything like that. I brought with me some of the pieces from the film back there. There's a T-shirt. Everybody got background artist T-shirt. So those people who weren't paid, here's what they kind of got. They got a T-shirt. They got a hat. They got food. They got paid for their travel, like mileage fee. People got paid, and we made a deal back when I was earlier talking about making a deal with them about what we could get for reenactors. And one of the things we asked for, and subsequently been done, was we wanted to see the power lines along the Emmitsburg Road buried. So they just weren't supposed to be there. And they agreed to it, and those lines have subsequently been buried. I believe it was from our suggestion, and I believe Turner pitched in a pile of money to have that done. So that was one contribution when I'm in Gettysburg and I look and don't see those awful power lines, that I know that the time there was kind of worth it. And getting to the last one, that's all, folks. So thank you for your attention, guys.
Any reason or explanation of the title Killer Angels that refer to anything in particular?
It's a line in the book. Chamberlain's talking to that sergeant, I forget his name. Gilrain, yeah. And he talked, he's saying, like we're killers, and then Gilrain said, well, we're killer angels. And that's where the title came from. That's what Shira wanted to be. But they were testing the title in pre-production, and nobody related to it. Didn't know it was a horror film or whatever. So that's why they decided just to make it Gettysburg. And it changed on the spot. In fact, people that went there early for filming, a lot of their badges and everything say Killer Angels. And those were the ones you wanted because, for collecting wise, because it wasn't it was a working title, and the title had been changed. Yeah.
Okay. I seem to remember, like, when they're making the movie, the filmmaker says it was too good for television, but probably not that good, but not movies. It was in between, and it seemed like it's pretty good as a movie. But it was too good. So if it was going to be 10
Parts,
parts, taking the commercial, but even if it was an hour, you think, well, there's a lot on the cutting room floor, but I guess that catalogs things out.
Yeah, as any movie, it's 10 weeks of film, and you get an hour and a half. You're right. It was too good for TV, and they weren't sure about it as a movie. But since it was on film, they were going to go for it. And I think one of the, I'm not going to call it a mistake, but one of the things that were kind of put a damper on it was so long. There was an intermission in it. And when it went to movie theaters, a movie could show 2 movies at the time they could only show 1. So they were losing revenue there. And it didn't do well at theaters, but it's had a life of its own since then. And it's one of the most popular videos or streaming you can possibly watch. It's really taken on a life of its own. I can't tell you how many schools I've been to. That's how they teach history. They have kids watch an hour of it or 2 hours of it. Just a way to get introduced to the topic. That's where it lives.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thank you. So I wish everyone has a great summer, or safe summer. I'll see you back here on September 14th. I'll be ready to announce the symposium. It's gonna be really good. We'll put tickets on sale. I should have our second Saturday slate of speakers for 2025 ready to announce as well. So see everyone back here in September. Have a safe summer. Thank you.
Anyway,